made up of some app downloads. I just made up these numbers because you're going to see this in work that you do where you've got some really big values and some really small values. And you can very easily, if you use a linear axis with regular spacing, sort of evenly spaced axis ticks, then you can lose a lot of this detail or to be able to fit everything on it, or just runs off the page. So I'm going to talk about how to deal with that and how to set that up in Excel. I've also got 1, 2, 3 variables here. I've got types of app, the number of times each app was downloaded, and how much each one costs. So I've got 3 variables, so it's a multivariate that I'm going to visualize as well using a bubble chart. And one of the things that's tricky about that is that something else that I'm dealing with here is that some of the costs are free. So Solitaire is free, and the COVID Near Me app is free as well. So that's a 0. So I've just gone, instead of it being $1 or free, I've gone and just put in a 0 here and here. But then how does that translate to size? So how do we see it in the bubble chart in Excel? In Illustrator, we can use a crosshair to represent the center of it. But to actually track it in Excel is not so straightforward. So let me show you a couple of workarounds that I've got for that here. So first of all, let's go and get started. So go Insert, and it's not a scatter plot because it has size as well. So it is a bubble chart. And so here we can see the issue with the fact that some of them, well, Excel does this very weird thing. It just thinks that we want this sort of axis scale. So we've got all this white space up here that I don't know if we're even using. But, oh yeah, we would, because we would go up to 32,000, presumably, if this is y-axis. This is x-axis. That's what we want. But we can't really relate this to the data. Let's have a look what's going on here. So we can right-click on the chart and go select data. That's what I just did. And we can see here that the chart data range is all of this at table. So that's right. The sheet name is, well, it's not called that. It's called this because it's not just downloads this week. It's also showing the apps. So I'm going to change that and update that, fix that up quickly, just so I know. Now it won't take effect until I hit OK. So let's just check the other things. So the X values here are, so across the X axis, which is your horizontal axis, we've got house, garden, cool maths, these things. So these actual names, you can't get it to show you names on a bubble chart, or at least I haven't been able to. You can with a bar chart, but here it's just going to pull those in across and represent them as numbers. But that's why we do it in Illustrator, right? So that's your x-axis. Let's have a look what's happening on the y-axis. So on the y-axis, it's highlighting the y-axis data now. So that's our vertical axis. That goes from 10, 12, 8 through to 2000. So that's along here. That's our y-axis. And that's that range from 2 is the smallest value to 32,000. So this is going from 2 to 32,000. But we're not in any negatives, so I don't know why the axis is showing us negatives, except maybe because of the size taking that up. So, and then the sizes of these bubbles here, we can see as well, are pulling in the cost. So that's what we want. So that's all looking good, but just in terms of how it's formatted and laid out, it's a bit confusing. So let's fix that, and we can see that once I hit OK, it updated the title there, so that's good. But it's very difficult to read this. It's very difficult by looking at this information design to tell the difference between number 5, which is, if we hover over it, the pop-up tells us what the point is. It's audiobooks. That's that one. To tell the difference between 5 and 4 in terms of the number of downloads is very difficult. And 2 and 1. So the downloads here, this vertical axis is really challenging us to be able to read and compare between the data values. So the way we can fix that is we can actually adjust this vertical axis so that instead of it showing us in 5,000 download increments, it it uses a nonlinear scale so that it might adjust and the scale adapts logarithmically in this case, exponentially in this case with the data. So we're going to format axis, and you can right click on it and we'll bring it up. You can also double click this and then it'll come up format axis. You have these two options here, and you've got paint bucket and all these other things, but you want to go for the data option. So we'll go into a logarithmic scale. That's what we want. So this is giving us a logarithmic scale for our axis, right? So now we can start to see the differences between where these things are a little bit more easily, but we do have like values up here that are way too high, that are actually beyond what we're dealing with. We're only going up to 32,000. That's our maximum. Sorry, I clicked on that, so it's kicked me out of it. So coming back to format axis, here, axis options. Let's change. Our minimum is 2. Minimum 2 downloads, so to have a minimum there of 1 makes sense. That's fine. Our maximum though is 32,000, and here it's saying that it's infinity. Here this maximum is incorrect, so whatever. Oh no, there it goes. It goes to infinity, E9. So we can change that to 32,000. Maybe give it a little bit more. We'll say 35,000. All right. So that's looking not better. What's just happened? Why is it only going up to 10,000? Ah, I know what's happened. It's because we've got those zeros, so it's not even bothering to show them. It's still making up its own mind because those ones are valued at 0. That one's valued at 0. So even though it's 32,000, it's ignoring it. So this is the other issue that I mentioned that I've got to work around for, and that will come back to this. So I would have thought that you'd be able to say, well, show me with that point anyway, even if it's a 0 value for this variable. But no. Instead, lucky, again, that we're doing our design in Illustrator. So we just need to get something that will allow us to do that design in Illustrator and know where that point is. So for that, my workaround is to actually go ahead and edit this and just call it something like 0.08 and add myself a note, should be 0. And the same with this guy here. There we go. So now it's given us those points, but I have to say this is very weird. Okay, let's see if it'll refresh if we add a data label. 632,000. That's COVID near me. Size 0.08. Reset. No. Format axis. Ah, okay. It just looks so close to it because it is exponentially going up to the next size. So I think we're going to have to go to 50,000 to be able to better see that difference. And our minors, maybe we could all right. By having that axis label in there, we can actually position that logically so you can see where it is relative to those 2 points. So it's very important if you're using a logarithmic, any kind of nonlinear scale, that you do label your axes and provide a way for people to understand that this distance here is not going to be the same as that distance there. So you can't just leave them as the grid lines alone. You need to provide the numeric value too. Now something else that we can do here is we can format our data labels. So at the moment, I would like to include some data labels because that'll also help me keep track of where everything is and what's what, since we don't have those horizontal axes names. So I'm going to call it the value from the cells. And here it gives me this little thing, and what do I do with it? Well, you can just click on that button like you saw me do before and select the series. So click and drag, and in it goes. Hit enter and OK, and it's got that range, and it will draw that range across logically because that's in the table as well. Let's just double check it. Well, actually what we can do is, instead of double checking it, we can add the other data with it too. So we've got it right there as we're working in Illustrator. So let's add in downloads this week and cost as well. So downloads this week is mapped to our Y value, and cost is mapped to our bubble size. We'll tick that box, and it's giving us that information. It overlaps the dots a bit, so let's just put it underneath. That seems to work the best to be able to find things. All right, maybe we can even make these a bit smaller too, 0.01. Yeah. Especially with a label underneath it, we should be able to find it. And 0.01 I'll remember. Then I've got that note, and I've got a note to myself here that that's should be 0. So this now then gives me all of that information, and we can double check it against our table. So audiobooks, 1,000 downloads, $14 each. Yep, there's a random check. Binge watch, 2,000 downloads, $12 each, and COVID Yumi, largest number of downloads, and it's free. But when we get, as I said, when we go to Illustrator, we'll make this 0, maybe add a crosshair, or if we're using shading or whatever we're using to demonstrate us this aspect, probably crosshair will be best to show that it's free, if that's what we were going to do. Okay, so